Hello and welcome to Cooking the Books with Heather. Today we are not going to be cooking from a cookbook. We're going to be making a recipe that I made myself. I started with a recipe that I found in the newspaper years and years and years ago, but I had to modify it because it did not work for me at all. If I can find the original recipe, I might go ahead and put it down below, but because this is a recipe that I feel like I developed, I will include all of the measurements for this. Today, we are making oatmeal chocolate chip cookies. I don't like oatmeal raisin. The original recipe was oatmeal raisin, and I don't know if substituting in chocolate chips instead of raisins made it not work, but whatever. When I first made it, it was just flat, did not work at all. So, these, however, are our favorite cookie. I prefer oatmeal chocolate chip even to regular chocolate chip. And we've made these so many times that my husband knows exactly what to do to help me. And so he helped me get all the ingredients ready. And we even modified them to be sort of a lactation cookie when I had babies 8+ years ago now. They're no longer babies. But so we've made them many, many, many times at this point. Anyway, to get started, we're going to take some of the oats and we're going to process this basically into oat flour. These are quick oats. As you might be able to tell, they're not this sort of rolled, old-fashioned oats. They are just quick oats, and we're going to use our food processor and try to get them close to the consistency of regular flour. So I'm probably not going to pulse it. You can pulse it if you want. It takes a while. I'm just going to turn it on and let it go till it's done. I'm going to call that good enough. And we're going to just take this out of here, and we're not going to use it right now. This was, turn it the right way. This was 1.25 cups of quick oats, and we have 1.5 cups that we're going to leave whole. We're not going to process those. Still trying to soften my frozen butter. It's getting there. But something we can do while we're waiting is we're going to mix our eggs. So we've got 3 large eggs. Whatever you have is probably fine. That we're just going to put the whole egg in. We don't have to separate them or anything. Into this bowl. And we're going to add. So we've got our 3 eggs in the bowl, and we're going to add a whole tablespoon of vanilla extract. So I use Mexican. You can use whatever you like. There we go. So I'm going to just take a whisk and mix this all up together thoroughly. Nicely mixed together. This is probably still a little cool, but we're going to call it good for now. So I've got 2 sticks of unsalted butter. I'm going to put in to my stand mixer. I'm going to go ahead and get that just sort of beating up a little bit by itself since it is kind of cold. This really should be at room temperature. Helps if I... Okay, it's on its way to not being so cold. But what we're going to do now is add the sugar. So we're just going to cream the sugar and the butter, and let's go ahead and do the sugars. We've got 1 cup of white sugar, just plain white granulated sugar. We've got 1 cup of light brown sugar. Both go in there. And then we also put in here, this is interesting, we put in our salt, which I'm using just some granulated sea salt, I think. Granulated, yeah, just like table salt size, not kosher salt size. And this is baking soda. So there's a teaspoon of baking soda and a teaspoon of salt in here. And we're going to add this and cream all of that together. And this is going to take a really long time. I'll let you know exactly how long it takes for me. Mine is pretty cold, which means it's going to take a little bit longer for it to sort of heat up and get creamy. It's supposed to be very light and smooth, and you can stop every so often and scrape down the sides, make sure it's getting all mixed up appropriately, and you don't just end up having some bits up on the sides. I end up doing that like 2 or 3 times at least. So we'll see how long this takes for us. When I do this at about medium speed. Just gonna scrape it down now. It says nowhere near done. It's certainly not light and creamy. You might have seen that depends on what my editor leaves in, I often will sort of put my hands on the outside of the bowl when the butter is too cold to be quite right yet. And that just helps transfer a little bit of heat into the ingredients. Helps it go a little bit faster, I think. All right. This is definitely getting better. Kind of see it's gotten lighter, it's gotten creamier, but still not quite where I want it to be. You can see sort of the difference to what it was before. Go another couple of minutes probably at least. This is pretty much what I'm looking to see here. It's much lighter, much creamier. It's all combined with the sugars. There we go. Now we're going to add our egg mixture in about 3 additions. Let's see. This doesn't have to be on low speed, so I'll do it probably on medium speed, about 1/3 each time, and scraping down in between. All right, that's 1 addition. That's my 2nd addition. And 1 more. Okay. There we go. That's all of our wet ingredients combined. Now, on low speed, we're going to add our flour. I think this is 2 cups of just plain all-purpose flour. So I'm going to add about half of it, and then I'm going to add the baking powder. We need another teaspoon of baking powder, not another teaspoon. But I'm going to add about half of this on low speed, add a teaspoon of baking powder, yes, and then add the rest. So I've got my half of my flour and my baking powder in here, and I'm just going to scrape it down. Now I'm going to get the rest of my flour on low speed. So I'm going to try to tap off the flour that kind of gets stuck up on the top. Scrape it down. All of my flour's in here. All of my leavening ingredients are in here. And now I'm going to add my oat flour and my quick oats. Again, on low speed. As it mixes, I'm going to add this. Now, if you'll notice, I kind of made a mess. One thing I've never had for my mixer is sort of a chute. Sort of make sure all the dry ingredients go down in there and don't puff out. If you have one of those, let me know what you think, because I've never had one and I really kind of want one, but I just haven't ever bought one. So that was 1.25 cups of my quick oats that were processed into oat flour. And now I'm going to add 1.5 cups of quick oats. All right, I'm just going to sort of get everything off of this and stir it up one more time. And then we're going to add our chocolate chips. I have just regular old Nestle Toll House semi-sweet chocolate chips here. You can use what you like. So I'm going to turn this on low again. And the last step is to stir in these chocolate chips. So this is 1.5 cups of semi-sweet chocolate chips. You can use whatever you like here. I'm going to stir those in just briefly. Now, sometimes when I'm scooping these out, the last bits don't have enough chocolate chips in them. And my husband says you can always have more chocolate chips in here, so put as many as you want in there. For me, I do it like this, and then if the end bits don't have enough chocolate chips, I just add a few more in. All right, now that is it for our cookie dough. And my crazy dog. I'm going to put this in the refrigerator because they do bake up a little bit better from cold when the dough has had a time to sort of rest and it's cold. They don't spread quite as much. These don't spread badly either way. And then we'll show you how we scoop them out and bake them. My oatmeal cookie batter, dough, whatever, has been in the refrigerator for probably about 1.5 hours. We watched a movie. So I have a cookie scoop here. I don't know exactly how much this is, but rounded sort of heaping tablespoons is kind of what we usually go for. So I'm going to just scoop some out on here. I have my oven heated to 375 degrees. I'm just going to plop these out. Okay, so I have about a dozen of these on the tray. I'm going to put them in the oven in the middle for 10 to 14 minutes. You can bake them up how you like them. We prefer them a little bit soft in the center, not super crispy. So we'll probably go on the 10-minute side. I'll let you know how long ours take to get the way we like them. You're looking for maybe a little bit of brown, but not a lot for what we like anyway. And while these are baking, I have another sheet with some wax paper on it. And I will be scooping the rest up onto that, and we will put that in the freezer, and then we can just take those off the wax paper, put them in a Ziploc bag in the freezer, and have cookies whenever. When you can bake them up right out of the freezer If they're right out of the freezer, they take a little bit longer, just, to heat up and everything. But yeah, that is it for our cookie recipe. I'll show you what they look like when they're all done, and we'll let you know what we think of this batch. On this episode of Cooking the Books with Heather, you watched me make my own recipe for oatmeal chocolate chip cookies. And I do feel pretty confident calling this my own recipe because I did spend quite a bit of time making multiple batches of this cookie to get it just right and just the way we wanted it many years ago, probably definitely more than 10 years ago. I sort of developed this recipe. I don't write down a lot of recipes or a lot of what I do, but since this was a baking recipe and something I wanted to be able to reproduce, I wrote everything down and can reproduce it very well, thankfully, because we love them. They turned out great as expected. That batch made with the disher that I was using, I ended up making just about 5 dozen. I think I had like 5 dozen plus one once I was all done. So that's a very large batch, but all I do is bake off what I want at that time, and then everything else I dish out, put on a baking tray with wax paper under it, put that in the freezer until it's frozen, and then you can put all of those into a zip top plastic freezer bag, and I write what they are and the time and temperature for baking them on the bag so that we know, exactly. I don't have to look up the recipe every time I want to bake them. And you can bake them directly from frozen. They may take an extra minute or two, but really with this cookie, it depends on how you like it. If you want it a little gooey in the middle or if you want it well baked. So you can do it however you like. We like ours sort of a medium, not super gooey, but we do like them when they're warm to be a little bit gooey in the middle. And I can't remember how long that was. I probably talked about it right afterwards. It's somewhere between 10 and 14 minutes. And you just have to kind of keep an eye on them. When they get a little brown around the edges only, that's when I usually pull them out for that. It is a little bit fiddly because you do have to grind the oats into sort of an oat flour. I've never tried. I'm sure somewhere you can probably buy oat flour. I have to think that's a thing, but I've never actually looked for it, so I might look for that. But I've never tried it with that, but I've always used quick oats and ground them into a flour-like consistency with the food processor. So that's a very important part of the recipe. So if you don't have a food processor, that would be a lot more difficult. You may be able to do that in a blender. I've never tried it. Let me know down below if you do try to grind any grains in a blender, if that works. Like I said, never tried it. Would love to know. So that part is a little more difficult. You do need a mixer. I guess you probably don't absolutely need a mixer, but it's a very big batch and it gets very stiff. Cookie dough generally is a kind of a stiff dough, so it's easier with a mixer. If you're very strong and don't get worn out really quickly like I generally do, you could probably do it by hand. But so the mixer and the food processor and all that, and mixing the eggs with the vanilla and mixing things in batches and scraping it down, it's all a little bit fiddly, but we've done it so many times, it doesn't bother me at all. I don't generally like things that are super fiddly or take a lot of steps, but once I get going, I'm good for this recipe because I kind of know every step. It's a little bit ingrained now. My husband even can help me with this and has been helping me make these just about every time I've made them recently. So you spread the work around and it's not so bad. And you'll have cookies for quite a long time if you put them in the freezer and like to eat them warm like we do. So if you enjoyed watching me make this, give me a thumbs up. Let me know what you think of my recipe in the comments down below. I will link the full recipe down there as well, so you don't have to watch and write down all of the measurements, or I hope I didn't forget one, that kind of thing. I will link to a full recipe below, text recipe, so you can just print it out or save it, however you like to save recipes. And if you've enjoyed watching me cook, hit the subscribe button and come back and watch me make something else next week.